debut episode, I'm excited to introduce you to Wendie Veloz, a social impact strategist and business coach who helps nonprofits and small businesses clarify their vision, implement scalable solutions, and gain access to funding. Wendie's passionate about leaders' mental health, helping them create sustainable social change, and approaches business ownership and leadership through the lens of an energy healer. If you're in for some out-of-the-box solutions that are guided by intuition and logic, Wendie's your gal. Wendie, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
I'm excited to be here. I haven't had you in this podcasting format to host me, so I'm excited about this.
Yeah, you're used to being the host, and I definitely want to talk about that. But first, I want to hear what your definition of abundance is for you today.
I think it's about having enough to be able to give freely to the things that bring me joy. So whether that's giving to others, giving to myself, giving to family, to be able to have the things I need to operate without question, and also be able to help others to do what they need to do to achieve their goals and whatever they want to bring to fruition. So that might be for some clients, or that might also just be for friends. So being able to think of the different spheres that I'm part of and bringing abundance to everyone and not just me.
I like that. It's this very share it all type of perspective. So rewind a little bit and talk a little bit about your upbringing as far as being Latina, and any experiences you had. I don't think abundance is definitely something that's generally talked about as a kid, especially in that culture. It wasn't talked about in my home. So share with me a little bit of that, and maybe when you first almost discovered the word or started to be aware of this concept.
I guess I could think about it in a sense of describing how I grew up, because that's probably the best way to understand how the concept of abundance struck me in the face at one point. I grew up, if you don't understand LA is one of those places where everything is urban sprawl and streets streets are right next to each other. So I grew up actually behind a gas station, funny enough. So my backyard backs up to a gas station, and definitely did not grow up in a house full of abundance, right? If you think about the way that a lot of Latino families, working class families in Los Angeles live, it is very much a scarcity mindset, paycheck to paycheck. It's an extremely expensive place to live in, and it's an extremely difficult place to be poor. So if you grow up with those two factors, it is definitely not a place where your mindset is that of abundance, right? You're not looking for the options, you're looking for any option out. So there wasn't an idea of abundance driving me when I was young. That was more of a get out of Dodge sort of driver. What I don't want and what I do want are very different things. And so how do I move towards what I wanted? And as I went to high school, I was able to see other families who didn't struggle, right? I think being very struck locally with my early education, once I moved a little further in the community and went to high school on the other side of the city, I was able to see people who had significantly bigger houses, but were still middle class. And I was like, So abundance can also be measurable at any place in your lifestyle. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be just about money, but it also could be about the things you have access to, the resources you have access to. And sometimes when you don't have money, you don't even have access to knowledge about resources. So there were so many factors in that time frame up until college that I was struggling with this concept. And then I think by the time I finally got to college, I made some breakthroughs of how do I bring abundance into my life? How do I make that happen for me? And what do I need to do? What steps do I need to take to be purposeful about attracting that abundance that I want?
I love that. I'm not sure that the concept of abundance hit me when I was in high school, so you're way ahead of me there. But I definitely also grew up not in the least bit wealthy. And I think the concept for me really started to develop when I was probably around 30 or so, like very much like into the career and starting to earn money, and then seeing the different levels, shall we say, of society just through work. So I'm a little jelly that you discovered it early. But so how does someone make that shift of, no matter where I came from, that doesn't need to define me, and I can create this for myself, and I just have to, access the resources or be willing to figure this out on my own? Like, how did you start to make that shift? Did you find rich friends, or like, how did you change?
I did the opposite. I went to the village. It was so eye-awakening. I didn't find rich friends. I became the rich friend, was kind of the answer. And when I went to grad school at Columbia, I was given the opportunity to go research in Uganda for 6 months, and I lived in a village with no power and no water in a Catholic parish. And when you see true poverty, you realize what abundance is and what you have. And even in that sense, I was a visitor to the culture, and I was very revered and respected for that. And I definitely had more than anyone that I knew at the time. Monetarily, even as a student, asset-wise, I had batteries that worked. I had a digital camera I could take pictures with. I came with a computer. Like, I had all these things that I could access that were resources. But because those were daily things in the United States, I didn't think of that as abundance. I didn't think of those as resources that I could use. Once I got to the village and realized how many resources I came with to the village, which, by the way, made me very popular, then I was able to see, oh, in my everyday life, I have abundance and I have resources, but I also take just not a least bit of care to some of them, or I don't pay attention to those resources in the way that I should to leverage them. And so once I saw the opposite of like, oh, I have abundance with me a lot of the time, in fact, just from the way that I've been able to move in my life, which other people don't always have. And then I can really move forward with understanding how to get to the next level. But I think it was not seeing up and wanting to be there. It was seeing down and understanding where I already was.
I love that shift of perspective. That is amazing. So let's dive into this concept of being resourceful, because that's really what we're touching on and getting at. Resourceful can mean reaching out to people that you already know, getting help from friends or things like that. But it could also mean physical resources, like you're saying, like batteries that work, a camera, a phone with a camera in it, Maybe you didn't have that at the time, but
that was a flip phone time. Sorry.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah. But for one to be a successful business owner and to really feel abundant, I think being agile is a really important tool in our toolbox. But then also that ability to be resourceful is super important. So walk us through, as you've built your business, which is now, just amazing and successful. I think on your show, it says that you've awarded in your career over 35 million in grants over your career. So that's just amazing. Walk us through how a small business owner can be resourceful and agile, or maybe you have some examples from your own experience.
Well, I definitely haven't given 35 away as a small business owner, so I don't want people coming to my door and saying, where's my grants? But I do help people access resources, right? And I think it's a very important concept, because sometimes we're thinking resources are money, and sometimes we're thinking resources, it could just be time. I break it down into 4 pieces: dollars, people, time, and donations. And I do that also for my own business, so that I understand where am I able to use my resources to give, or to use it to grow the business, or use it to do, what I need to do. But I think early on, I not only didn't have that framework, I hadn't given the framework to anybody because I hadn't thought about it, but I also just didn't understand that a lot of the time what I was giving was my time. It was my talent. It was things that people were asking me for free because they knew that I had it, but they hadn't been used to paying me for it as a business. And it was very much a transition that I had to make to say, this is a resource I'm offering to you, but I need resources in return to make that offer. And I think sometimes as early stage entrepreneurs, we're sitting in our zone of genius, which we have maybe been in the past, but not been empowered to say that it has a cost or that it is a resource that's valuable to someone. And once you make that shift and you're able to change your mindset, then you're able to tackle the more critical concepts of like, well, how much should it cost? Or how valuable is my time? Or am I trading this time for something that brings me joy in order to provide this service that actually isn't bringing me joy? And when you get to I think a later stage in entrepreneurship, you're not struggling and worrying about the money. You can have some of those internal conversations with yourself and say, no, I don't want to do those kinds of contracts anymore. Because not only do they not bring me joy, but the resources that they bring are not aligned with my overall vision. And I think that those were the pieces that like I really felt in the last couple of years, because I'm 3 years into my business. I felt the shift of just learning and having to process through. And no one could have shortcutted that for me.
I agree with you. I think early on, you're trying to accept any contract you can. And then at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, you're able to say, I don't like this company, client, the way they treat me, they refuse to accept my new rates or like whatever it is. And you're able to start weeding out some things that don't align. So yes, that is definitely a good growth point. Let's hear why you started your own business after such a successful career. What made you jump and what made you have this mindset and belief that you could do this on your own?
Well, that was the universe telling me that I had no other choice. That was not all me, I will say. Whatever you believe in, there is always, I think, other factors that have influence over you. And so, I mean, I was on the verge of a double burnout, was really the honest answer. I had gone from the federal government in a burnout situation, actually had a lawsuit for discrimination against the government, moved into local government, worked the pandemic in public health, 80-hour weeks, and then came into a leadership change and walked in on a Wednesday and my job was gone. No more. No more office of 20 staff that you manage. Gone. So what was I to do, right? Like I didn't have very many choices at that point because I had already had 2 levels of service that I'd done, that I tried to maintain that line in my career, and it didn't fit. And so what other sectors are there? Nonprofit, I've already done that. And so then I said, well, I could go private and just be a consultant as a, in private business, but why not be the owner? Like, it doesn't make any sense for me as a person to be consistently trying to rely on someone else's mission and vision for the direction of my life. So if I want to move my life in the direction that I wanted to move it in, then I need to be the owner. And that was really a decision that I made as I walked out of the door of losing my job. So by the time I drove home, I was already a business owner, which, like I said, it wasn't a very long thought out process. I never looked for another job, never tried to go back into a role in the government. I just said, okay, enough for me. And I'm going to make this work. And I've sat in my little chair and gone to my networking meetings and done the steps that I need to do as a business owner to make it work. And I think that's the message for folks is like, you can go through something really difficult for you and feel like, oh, this beat me down, or this is going to keep me in a certain place, or I have to stay where I'm at and stay in this level. Or you can use it as an opportunity to grow. And I think that that's the message is don't just let it keep you down or keep you feeling worse than you were before. Use it as the opportunity to move forward as a phoenix rising through whatever growth needs to happen.
I agree with you. That like fire that happens when you make that initial jump and you are bound and determined and nothing can stop you and you're going to start this business. It's amazing. It tends to wane after a while. And it's so important to go back to that moment and remember why the heck you're here in your home office alone, day after day, struggling, and kind of circle back to that why and remember that fire and remember maybe what it was like in corporate or how they treated or the burnout or whatever it was, because this is our new normal. And it becomes very mundane. It can, right? So to maintain that passion after a while is just as important as the passion was when you first got started. Have you experienced that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think somewhere in year one where I decided like there had to be hammock Thursdays because I just needed to go out and lay in my hammock in the sun, and sitting in my house being miserable behind a computer was not doing me any good. Or when I decided I was just going to go to the pool and like have lunch at the pool, and that's okay as an entrepreneur to do. Sometimes I'll bugger off and I'll go paddleboard on a Friday morning. Those moments are the moments where I remember that I made this choice so I have that freedom. And so those other moments where I feel like I'm struggling through a task, or I'm not focused, or I'm not seeing the leads that I want, or whatever difficulty I'm having that day, they're there so I could have those other moments in my life, right? And I know that that was really the motivation for me, was freedom of time early on. And so when I started experiencing freedom of time, I had to celebrate it. Like I couldn't just sit in the hammock and be like, oh, yay, hammock day. I really was like, yo, hammock day, like this is exciting. I get to do this because these other times I'm not doing this, right? And so, but there's also people at 2 p.m. with the 9 to 5 job who cannot even possibly think about taking a hammock day without having to take some sort of leave to do it, right? So that was one of the things I learned, was how do I appreciate the moments?
I love that reminder because for sure, I remember leaving the office to go for a walk or go for a run, and then like changing quickly in the bathroom and like refreshing real fast, and then eating at your desk because clearly you spent your lunch break out walking or running. And, it's all this attempt at maintaining mental health is what I know it as now. I didn't have that language, say 5 years ago. But to recognize, hey, now I see my kids off to school every day. I take the dogs for a walk. I could take a midday walk if I wanted. I'm going to go get my hair done this afternoon. Like things that I would have to request time off for. And like you said, remembering, this is pretty great. This is why I did this. Yes, there are times of struggle, but there's also a lot of freedom built in. And yeah, you can't spend all your time outside in a hammock and walking and doing that. You still do have to put in the work, but just that reminder, I think, is so important.
And it's also not, I think, beating yourself up when you are taking that time off, because it's very easy for you to say, well, I don't have the leads that I want, so I shouldn't be taking the hammock day. I should just be sitting in front of the desk toiling away until what? A lead comes in magically? That's not how that's going to work.
Yes. And I'm laughing because that's probably my exact thought pattern. You just called me out.
Sorry. I am a business coach.
Yes, and we need that. And yeah, not offended at all. I do need to be called out sometimes. But that's exactly the thought pattern that I tend to fall in, is that, okay, we have so much to do today. All right, dogs, you only get a 15-minute walk instead of our 30 because like mommy doesn't have time for this, right? So rather than giving myself that space and, potentially relaxing more into the work that I have to do, and just that shift. I appreciate that.
I mean, the reality is there are client appointments, right? Like you do have to get back in the 15 minutes to get to something. You can't always take the luxurious walks and the luxurious lunches, but, scheduling a day off for yourself in a calendar month, very important. And it's a practice that anyone can put in. You can give yourself the day off. There's no permission needed. You don't need to check in with anybody. Maybe you put it out in office, maybe you don't. I mean, I don't know. But it's up to you to give it to yourself. And if you don't schedule it, then you're not going to take it. And even if you schedule it, you still may not take it. So just schedule it. Just try.
I love that. Okay, so keep it coming with the tips, because I love that idea of just blocking off a day once a month. I'm going to say minimum. I do block off one day a week for what I call internal work. Maybe I'm at my desk working on client work. Maybe I'm not. But guess what? I don't have to put on makeup or get on a recording or do anything that I consider to be outward facing. I'm not taking client calls. I'm not taking potential client calls. I'm not, going to a network meeting. I literally can sit here in my sweatpants and look like I'm a homeless person or something and do whatever I need to do in silence. And that's the introvert side of me coming out of just needing that day of no extra input and just me. But I love the full day off idea. What else do you have for us?
The things that I try to focus on for myself is the 8 dimensions of well-being. So this is something that I learned early on when I was actually an expert in mental health in one of my roles, was that, there is actually a framework from wellness beyond mental health, right? So we think about mental wellness all the time, but there are 7 other dimensions at least, in some models 9, but there are a lot of other dimensions of well-being that you can be thinking about every single day. From your intellectual wellness, reading a book, to your financial wellness, making sure that you're, paying down debt or whatever your goals are. All of those things contribute to how you're feeling and how you're living your life. And so when I think about my wellness, I tell people I've done a wellness reset multiple times. And then this is something you've heard me talk about, the holistic wellness reset before. This is definitely important for women, particularly because we have so many roles and stressors in our lives, but also as business owners, we face some pretty unique challenges. And if we're only facing one part of our wellness, like our mental health every day, or our physical, going on a walk every day, then there's probably some other things like social connections or other pieces that we just might not even be thinking about. But if we put some effort there and we put some attention or intention there, it might change everything for us. So looking at it holistically and saying, what am I missing? And what did I really enjoy in the past that just is like fallen away and I don't make time for it now? But I wish I did, right? And bringing that back and giving yourself the ability to make a comeback on some things. Like maybe you played pickleball before, or maybe you were really good at yoga handstands, like whatever it is, bring a little bit of that joy back to yourself to just get yourself used to taking the time for yourself again, and then introduce new things. Like don't go all out and be like, I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro tomorrow. Like that may not be doable, but going on a hike like up the closest mountain for a half a day might be doable, right? So like kind of framing it in doable pieces, even if you are looking at those 8 dimensions, because it can get really big, but trying to find pieces that guarantee will bring you joy.
I like that. So let me ask you, this is something that came to mind while you were sharing that. Do you take the time to set goals in those different areas of your life as well as in your business? Because that's a new concept for me, I think, or maybe one that I'm refreshing, because I remember when I worked in corporate, sure, you can set goals, but it really just depends on the work that they give you. So a lot of accomplishments and goals had to do with my personal life, my family life, things that I was fully in control of. But I've found that as a business owner the past few years, all goal setting nearly is focused on the business. It's client numbers, revenue numbers, number of hours worked, what the team is doing, all of this. And the personal side of goal setting, aside from like reading books or something like that I enjoy, has kind of disappeared. And that's starting to, I guess, balance is coming back into my life or something. But yeah, so do you set goals in all areas? And what does that look like for you?
I don't know if I do it in such a like structured way. I think I still think of it in this concept of having a wellness recipe. Like, what are the facets that I'm really working hard on? Am I really working hard on finances, which personal finances and business finances obviously go together. So that's a yes. But then, am I looking at my relationships and my connections? Am I deepening my connection with my parents who are getting on in their years? What does that look like at this phase in my life where I live out of the state and they are needing care, right? So I think there is a lot of other questions in there for me that are important, but it's not maybe check the box on every facet. Like, did I this quarter go to see my parents? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not doing it in that way for my personal life. But I am being curious and asking myself the questions in those different facets. And even in the spirituality, what are my beliefs at this point in life? What do I connect to? What theology do I connect to still or not, right? I think that we all can explore and be curious. And goals don't have to be these big, scary, rigid things like they are in corporate that are quarterly, right? They can really be about the trajectory of our journey and how are we incrementally moving forward to the life that we want to fulfill. And I don't think of it as an accomplishment, check the box way. I think of it as a continual, sort of path that we're on. And as you move forward, you've got to look backwards and recognize where you came from, which also then means you're able to move forward with confidence. And there's sort of this, there's an African symbol, the Sankofa, that represents this. It's also sort of like learning and understanding where you're going, where the path is that you've been in the past. And I think that for me, goals are the same way. I understand what I've already accomplished and I know where I want to go, but I don't think that I have to very rigidly walk that path forward.
I love that. You'll have to send me this African symbol so that I can eyeball this thing and try to embrace it. I love that.
Yes,
Thank you
I'll
so
send
much.
you. I think it's a Ghanaian symbol, if I remember, but I will send you the symbol. And there's two different versions. There's a heart and a bird. And actually, for my wellness website, I've incorporated that symbol and the heart version into my logo. So it's the only reason why I know it very well.
I love that. Okay,
Yeah.
so on that note, tell us about your business and lead us into when and why you started your podcast. But let's hear about your business mainly first.
Sure. Well, so as you can tell, I have a passion for well-being and living a holistic wellness lifestyle, but I wasn't sure when I lost the job what I was exactly going to do with that. And I had a wellness website that was already monetized. And so I was looking to see, what I could do with that as a business. When I realized that my real passion is helping social entrepreneurs, people who are helping change the world and just have lived experience, educational experience, or job experience that they want to move forward on their own. And whether that's through a business or a nonprofit, it doesn't matter. I can help them to amplify their influence, their impact, their income, and also probably just to have a better time doing it, right? And so my goal is to just keep coaching. I'm an executive coach, so keep coaching some of the entrepreneurs that I work with, but also to create a community around this collective impact concept, making sure that folks have the supports that they need so that their organizations can thrive and be sustainable, but also so that these organizations that do good for the community don't go away, right? Just we, as in general, as people, benefit from these types of organizations being here in our fabric, and they're very vulnerable, and it's very important for them to have supports. So that's what I've developed as a business model: training, technical assistance, executive coaching. And, we offer it across the nation. And so as I was, well, actually across the world, so I've had some clients outside of the US as well. And when I was early on in building this business, I had a presence on social audio, and I initially recognized the power of audio and how sharing these thoughts about impact and world change and leadership and personal development and wellness and all these things were very fascinating to people. And I said, wow, why don't I just turn this into a podcast? And so I was ruminating on that for a while, and I was trying to figure out how to do it. And then the social audio app I was using gave the ability to record. And it was like, game over, I'm done. I just took all the recordings that I had with a bottle of wine on a Friday night, and I went into my MacBook and I was like, how do I make a podcast? And I just sat there. And in that, I want to say 6-hour block, I started out with the Google, how do I make a podcast on my MacBook? And I ended up making my own theme music, so I knew it was mine, and producing the entire podcast. In the first 1 or 2 episodes, I had edited two or 3 episodes in that first work sprint. And it was struggling through, figuring it out, doing it all manually, being in, I think I was using the music app on my MacBook. GarageBand, that's what it was. I was using GarageBand in the early days before I got to Script. It was just rough and probably horrible, but, it was just go do it, right? And so I recognize the power of the recordings to share those recordings and the thoughts that people were sharing when I was setting up a topic, and how many people just came through and their voices and their thoughts were just so powerful. So I'm excited because the whole first season is just audio only. It's just in that style. There will never be a way to reproduce it again. It will only ever be that content. And then, it's moved forward in a different format with interviews and sort of more traditional podcast style like this. But I think that the beauty in the evolution is, if people go back to the first season, they'll only be able to ever find it in audio.
I'm really impressed that in one sitting you were able to kind of go from how do I do this Google to have a few episodes ready. You made your own music, so many awesome things in that little setting. And I'll share way back, I produced my first podcast with iMovie and GarageBand. I had no clue what I was doing except what I found on Google. And it grows, right? Your knowledge grows, your resources grow, your skills grow. You adopt a new program, you go through that learning curve and adjust to that new software. More software comes out, AI is added, like the learning
So many things.
the learning and growing and everything just never stops. But you wouldn't be here if you weren't there. So that initial struggle, I think, is so important and so telling of the journey that you could go on and your trajectory, right? Because that right there is kind of like proving to yourself how badly you want it, if you want it. If you're not even willing to sit down and struggle that first go, then you got to kind of question like, okay, well, then am I going to just pay for this whole thing and not ever do it myself and just outsource it? That's one option. Or sit there and struggle through, grow until you're able to outsource it. So I love that so much.
The funny part, though, was in the back of my mind, right? I'd always grown up watching Oprah and saying, I'm the Latina Oprah. But I never got cast to be any kind of TV reporter, actress, even living near Hollywood. Like that never happened magically. So suddenly podcasting became my road of like, well, I could make that happen myself. Do I need to wait for someone else to pick me, or can I just pick myself? Like, can I just get myself these skills? Can I just learn what I need to learn to become whatever it is I want to be? Even if it's not becoming the Latina Oprah, it could just be becoming Wendie Veloz, and that's absolutely fine. But until I try, I'm not going to be able to do that. And I think that that's exactly what you were saying. Like, I couldn't be at this me if I wasn't that me with the bottle of wine and like 6 solid hours of work.
Exactly. And you never know. Latina Oprah Wendie could still be in your future.
Maybe bigger. You never know.
Exactly.
Maybe Oprah one day will hear about me.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's so awesome. Okay, so then you saw the power of recorded audio early on. What did that mean then as far as seeing that power? Like, what did you see? And then bring us forward to current day. How has the podcast grown aside from now I know that you don't produce your own show anymore and you have an editor. Yay. And then you've incorporated interviews. You've got a commercial. Like, you know, there's been this progression of growth. But walk us through that. And like, what have you seen for your show growth wise and how it's contributed to your business in each stage?
Yeah, I think the early audio days is where I learned that you could just talk and attract clients. I did not, I mean, I guess I've come from a background of doing public speaking in person, right? So filling rooms with 500 people and letting me talk at them is not an abnormal thing in my life. But talking to no one and then having thousands of people potentially listen to it later, that was a totally new concept. I was like, I don't see the people. They're not here. I don't know if they're going to come. They may not. What's happening here? So I had to have a little bit of faith in myself that whatever I was bringing in person could just be translated to this medium. And there wasn't going to be like this, no one coming. It would be a Field of Dreams sort of situation. So I think once I got through that mental hurdle of you're not talking to no one, you're talking to everyone, then I was able to really say, okay, everyone also needs to include these particular clients and these particular people that I want to attract to me. And I know that they are attracted to me because after I was on the social audio app, I was able to get clients from there. So there was obvious evidence that me just talking will bring the right people. So the growth has been me investing in that concept over the couple of seasons that we've been on air. How can I be better as an interviewer? How can I get better guests? How can I be a better gatekeeper to the voices that I'm uplifting to make sure that they meet the values that I want my podcast to espouse? How can I really make sure that the details that matter, whether it's lighting or editing or whatever it is, that those things are embedded as soon as I can, right? So that way I'm growing, the podcast is growing, and hopefully not only that, it's also growing those people who I want to attract, right? And really thinking about the graphics, the colors, like I've changed almost everything and the whole suite of what I could change around this podcast. Almost everything has been altered. How we do show notes, everything. And so it was out of a labor of love, I think, to want to improve and not give up. Because when you're podcasting and you don't see the thousands of people and it's not the Field of Dreams situation, you could very easily be like 20 episodes and deuces. But because I was like, no, I know they're out there. I know they like what I have to say. I know they come when I talk. I'm going to stick with it, right? And I'm going to see it to fruition, and it's going to get big. And that's just what's in my head.
I think this concept of, I know this is right, I'm going to just put my head down and do it. I might look up in 2 or 3 years or 2 or 3 seasons, and then I'll kind of evaluate ROI. Or maybe that's not even the right phrase. Maybe at that point, yes, it's a ROI thing, but it's also like, how do we shift this to attract or retain listeners in a better way? Maybe we're seeing the attraction, but not the retention, or there's different factors to adjust. And that, in my mind, balances with the way we might approach other things where you're really testing if it works, like within a month or 2, because podcasting is not like that. Podcasting is 2-3 years, 2-3 seasons at least of content that you're creating before you can really truly evaluate. Whereas other endeavors, you need to measure a little bit faster and make decisions faster. So it's like this push and pull dynamic of how you approach something.
Can I give a tangible example for your listeners so that, and I'm always happy to give people numbers so that they understand this concept. And this is a very striking one. With 1 year of effort, consistently putting almost weekly newsletters out on LinkedIn, I was able to grow a LinkedIn newsletter to 10,000 people. With 3 years of effort, almost weekly putting out episodes for a majority of the year, I still have not seen that many downloads total. Now, what does it tell you, though? The consistency and the platforms and the medium matter, but also exactly what you said, podcasting can lag for some shows, but unless you really put the effort in to say like, well, why is this happening, or why am I not seeing the numbers? I don't know that you can really improve them, right? So I think that's the other thing for people to understand is like, if you're seeing something that doesn't fit, you're probably going to need to make a change at some point. And it's just about, when do you have the means or the ability to make that change?
Absolutely. And I think the newsletter idea is really tangible, because I think we're all noticing this revival of LinkedIn lately within the past year or 2. Definitely when it started out, let's just say 10 years ago. I don't even actually know when LinkedIn launched. But it was this weird thing, like, what is this, a business Facebook? Like, I don't...
I just would look for jobs on there.
Yeah,
that's all. It's just job looking.
Like, I did not understand how it was supposed to work. And then lately, I don't know if they've changed things on the platform. I'm sure they have. I'm sure there have been updates. There's a lot more options as far as newsletters and things. But kind of noticing, hey, if the platforms are always doing updates and integrations and changes, then that goes back to the agility piece that I brought up before. Like, we have to be so agile as business owners and be able to say, like, well, I'm not seeing the numbers in my podcasting yet, but I want to stick with it, and I want to continue tweaking and adjusting and learning. And hey, this thing is working over here, so why don't I use this big list to drive listeners to my podcast or whatever. There's lots of different ways to approach that.
That's always the thought. What can I use this big list for? And I haven't say if I figured it out, to be honest. I think what the big list likes is just hearing me tell them stories in a written format, which can be totally fine, right? Because there's different audiences who connect with different types of content and different platforms. And they often don't like to move to other places. But where do I need them to move? To my email list. That's where I need them to move. Whether they're listening to the podcast, they're on the newsletter, they're following me on LinkedIn or Instagram, they need to move to my email list. So that's really the goal as a business owner right now, is how can I start moving people to be in closer to me And this collective that I'm building is one of those ways that I'm planning to do that. But the email list is the other one I think is a big ticket.
Absolutely. Okay, so we will wrap this up in just a minute, but first I want to hear about how you pull in this concept of abundance into the way you create content today in your business. Because more often than not, business owners feel like this content creation side is a have to do, gotta do, don't have time to do struggle. And so how have you managed to balance this all or find harmony between all of these different tasks? And how do you pull in abundance today?
I always try to offer, and I don't use the word abundance a lot, so I love that you're pressing me on it, because I'm like, what is that? What is the word that I actually give to my clients? But I try to help my clients think about all of the different ways that you can bring in the resources that you need to do the work that you need to do to be able to have the abundance that you want, whether that's, personal abundance or, like I said, being able to give what you want. And some of the ways that you need to be doing it at this point is social media and content generation. And it's almost like we can't get around that as business owners. I love to walk people through that, because that's really where I sit in that impact and that nexus of, well, what is your marketing? What is your income? What is your impact? And how do we bring all those three things together to really fuel your business? And the content generation doesn't need to be difficult, but it does need to be strategic. And if you have a website that's out of date and doesn't actually work for you and is not aligned to the services you currently provide, you can create all the content you want. Nobody can buy it. So there's a couple of different pieces that you have to put together. And in the digital age, you kind of can't get around it, right? Having a website, being able to be searchable and found in search is important. And content can help you with that. That LinkedIn newsletter, the reason it grew was because I'm good at writing and good at SEO, and Google picked it up. Like it wasn't me having 10,000 friends. I can assure you, I don't. But you really do need to be focused on the types of content that you're creating and what is the message, who is the audience you want to draw in, and then how are you converting them over to those other places, whether it's a sale or an email or whatever it is. And if you don't know, give somebody a holler or give somebody a call who knows, and take the shortcut. Like, you don't have to struggle through it, but you probably will have to come with some information so that person can help you get there faster.
And is that something that you generally are coaching business owners through? Like, if they're listening to you and they're like, good Lord, I need to talk to Wendie, how can they reach out to you?
Yes, so my website is wendieveloz.com, and you can reach out to me there. I offer coaching packages for individuals and teams, and then I also have, like I said, a community that you can join. And then you can always listen to my podcast. There's free content on my podcast, my blog, my Instagram, LinkedIn. So you can go to any one of those outlets and start learning more about me and how I think and how I work. And then when you're ready, just come on over and I'll be ready to help you.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this amazing wisdom. And yes, everyone, please go listen to Wendie's show. It's amazing. Social impact level up. And thank you, Wendie.
Yes, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.